Welcome to our live interview series, a key part of WFP Decision 2020. We want to thank everyone who's streaming in from across the country, our members of Rhode Island WFP in the house today. Give it up. Yeah. And all of our members that are having house parties, we see you. And I'd like to take this opportunity to introduce my colleague, Nalini Stamp, who will remind all of us what our process is.
Before I get started with the process, I also want to thank ACT-TV, who are our media partners, and it was a progressive media organization that was founded after Occupy Wall Street. Thank you so much, ACT-TV. And so for those of you who aren't familiar with the Working Families Party, we are an independent, grassroots political party building an America that is for the many and not just the privileged few. If you want to throw down with us, please text WFP to 738-674. We're endorsing a candidate because we believe the best way to beat Donald Trump is to nominate someone with a bold, transformative vision for social justice in the United States. In this process, we are modeling the type of democracy that we all believe we deserve. Over the course of the next 2 weeks, we will be interviewing all 6 of our final applicants that are applying for our endorsement, with questions from Working Families Party members and allies from across the country. After the candidates have taken your questions, we'll move on to a vote in September. So listen closely. Here's how the vote will work. The Working Families Party National Committee, which includes representatives from our state chapters, national progressive and movement leaders, will get a half of the vote share. WFP members and supporters will also receive an equal vote share. The supporter and membership vote will be held online. From September 4th through September 6th, we'll have an affirmation period where you'll get to join the process, where supporters can go online and affirm. People who affirm will then get to vote from September 9th to September 13th. And we're going to be using ranked choice voting. Here's how ranked choice voting works. Instead of just casting one vote for one candidate, everyone who votes will be able to rank their candidate preferences from first to last. If no one's first choice gets more than 50% of the combined vote of our national committee and the WFP membership, the bottom ranked candidates is eliminated and their votes are reallocated to the voter's second choice. This process continues until one of the candidates crosses the 50% threshold and wins. That's it. That's the process. If you want to be a part of it and help us decide who the Working Families Party endorses, text WFP to 738-674. And with that, and without further ado, to take this hot seat right here, please welcome Senator Elizabeth Warren.
Thank you very much.
Nice, good to see you.
It's good to see you.
Good to see you. Are you ready?
You bet I'm ready. I was born ready.
Right on. So, Senator Warren, we have a lot of ground to cover. So we're going to give you about 3 minutes to just sort of open up. And then for each question, we're going to give you about 2 minutes to sort of answer from the studio audience and some folks from the live stream.
Sounds good. I will do my best.
Great. So,
all right. Our country is in a crisis right now. We have a country that works great for a thinner and thinner and thinner slice at the top. It's just not working for much of anyone else. A country that works great for giant drug companies just doesn't work for anybody trying to fill a prescription. A country that's working great for private prisons and private incarceration at the border, but not for the people whose lives are torn apart. A country that is working great for giant oil companies that want to drill everywhere, but not for people who see climate change bearing down upon us. This is corruption, pure and simple, and we need to call it out for what it is. Why does this country work so well for those at the top and not for anyone else? Well, Donald Trump really understands the key to that, and that is turn working people against working people. Turn against them. If you have a problem in your life, says Donald Trump, blame it on them. Someone who doesn't look like you, someone who isn't the same color as you, someone who doesn't worship like you, someone who wasn't born where you were born, blame them. And he figures that way, so long as people are divided, so long as they're fighting with each other, then the rich and the powerful, they just keep raking it off the top. Well, I believe that most people in this country really want pretty much the same things. They want a chance to build a life. They want a chance to build some security. They want a chance to be able to give their children a real future. And I believe that when we make those investments together, we can make that happen in America. It's going to be big structural change that we're going to need. We're going to have to attack the corruption head on, and then we're going to have to make some structural change in this economy. We need more power in the hands of workers. That means make it easier to join a union and give unions more power when they negotiate. We also need an economy where everybody pays a fair share. And I've proposed a wealth tax. That's a 2-cent tax on the top 0.1%. Your first 50 million, you get to keep free and clear. But your 50 millionth and first dollar, pitch in 2 cents. And 2 cents for every dollar after that. And you know what we can do with that? We can do universal child care. We can do universal pre-K for every 3-year-old and 4-year-old. We can raise the wages of every child care worker and preschool teacher in this country. We can do universal college for every one of our kids. We can invest $50 billion into historically black colleges and universities, level the playing field a little, and we can cancel student loan debt for 95% of the kids who've got it. We can make real change in this country, but it requires that we come together, that we build a grassroots movement, that we win in the primary, that we win in the general, and then the real work starts, that we make real change come January 2021.
Thank you. And so let's get right into it. You covered a lot of ground there.
You bet.
And so we're going to kind of try to dig in a little bit.
Okay.
So I'm going to take the privilege for the first question to be about the Working Families Party. And so the Working Families Party is committed to building a mass, multiracial base of working people. And we want that base to be all across the country, in every region. And we want to recruit and elect candidates up and down the ballot on a program of transformative change, right? Now, we have a track record of electing insurgent champions to office and translating those victories to the ballot box into real policy wins for working people. Now, increasingly, we want to support candidates who not only see the WFP as a valuable ally, but also see the WFP as their political home and under a banner under which they march. So if you have the privilege and honor of our base of grassroots volunteers and institutions endorsing you as their candidate, how do you imagine you would work with the Working Families Party?
So, you know, this isn't my first time to this rodeo. I've worked with the Working Families Party before, in fact, a long time to good effect, particularly following the financial crash.
Senator Warren.
Oh, we got this.
Okay.
Particularly following the financial crash. You may remember that I had an idea for a consumer agency. I thought that really we should just stop the business of banks making their profits by cheating people, and that we ought to have an agency to be on the side of the families instead of on the side of the banks. And so I came up with the idea for the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. And the Working Families Party was one of the first groups that jumped in and said, we'll help make that happen. And we fought side by side against some incredible odds. I remember folks said at the time, don't even get in this fight, because there is no way you can win. The banks will never let this happen. And sure enough, they spent more than $1 million a day for over a year fighting those financial reforms. And the thing they hated the most was that consumer agency, because it really would help level the playing field for millions of working families. We hung in there. We fought for it anyway. President Obama signed that agency into law. I spent a year setting it up. And that little agency has now forced the biggest banks in this country to return more than $12 billion directly to people they cheated. Now that's making government work for the people. And Working Families Party was there right from the beginning. And as I built that agency, right there, helping us make sure we got the pieces right. This is about partnership from the beginning. And if I had 2 more minutes, I'd talk about the student loan debt and the work we've done together on that. But I'll stop there.
Okay.
We've done this.
Yes. Thank you for that. And so our country and the world is facing a set of acute, intersecting crises, from soaring inequality to a warming planet, to mass migration, to rising white Christian nationalism, to sort of wars, both existing and potential wars, to the eroding trust on basic government institutions and democracy itself. Each of the candidates we're considering for our endorsement has put forth some pretty ambitious plans to tackle at least some of those crises I mentioned. Most, if not all, of these plans are sure to encounter considerable pushback, right? And resistance from the Republican Party for sure, but also from moderate and centrist Democrats in the House and Senate, and from wealthy donors and powerful industries. So my question is, what really is your plan to take on that opposition? And can you be specific about what role you think movements and independent political organizations like ours may play?
Okay, so I have a lot of plans around this because I want to make it clear. I'm not running for president just to talk about change. I'm running for president to make change. And that's the whole heart of this for me. So, you know, I have a lot of plans. You've heard that, and I get teased a lot about that.
We're fully aware.
But here's the deal.
Yep.
When you make your plans clear, and then you win on those plans, that has an effect on your own party and an effect on the other party. Because it gives you the capacity to say, hey, nobody was fooled here. I told you exactly what I wanted to do. I told you we ran on a 2-cent wealth tax. We ran on strengthening the hands of unions. We ran on canceling student loan debt. So now it's time to get this done. That's part one.
Okay.
Part two is to recognize we have a dysfunctional Congress. And this idea that we're going to have a Senate that still runs with a filibuster, so it takes 60 votes to get anything done, we cannot continue to give in to the folks who just don't want to get anything done. Our job, my job, is going to be from the first to say, if Mitch McConnell's still in there trying to play the same games he played against President Obama, time to get rid of the filibuster. That strengthens the hand of the president, and it also strengthens the hand of the people who want work done. I'll just say off to the side, we talk about guns, for example. I was in the Senate in 2013 when 54 people in the Senate voted for background checks and to get rid of assault rifles. You may recall that meant it failed because it didn't make the 60 vote threshold. Time to do away with that. But then the third part, and that is, how do you hold Congress really accountable? That's what movements are all about. That's why right now I am doing everything I can to build a grassroots movement. I don't go behind closed doors with millionaires. I don't spend my time with corporate CEOs. I spend my time here. I've had town halls now in 25 states plus Puerto Rico. I've been to lots of red states as well as blue states and lots of red areas within purple states, all reaching out to people and not just saying, here's a good idea, here's a good person to vote for, but saying, be part of this. Pitch in $5, volunteer an hour, come and join us and bring a neighbor, bring a friend, bring your sister, talk to your uncle about this. Because if we build that kind of movement, that's our comparative advantage come November 2020. But more importantly, that's how we hold Congress accountable come January 2021.
Thank you. So you spend a good amount of your career pointing to the structural problems in Wall Street, right? Both as a teacher and academic and now in government. Now, right now, Wall Street millionaires and billionaires who run private equity funds are extracting wealth from our communities, right? Now, including destroying jobs and making housing increasingly unaffordable. So what do we do to stop that?
Oh, sure. I got a plan on this one too. Okay.
Not surprised.
No, but it's true. So let's do two parts on this one also. And the first one is private equity. You know, you correctly describe it. These are a bunch of folks who come in, they buy up local businesses, local properties, and here's the deal. Strip as much wealth out of them, leave hollow shells, and then the business implodes. This is Sears, this is Toys R Us, right? These are other big stores, and it's happened in retail, but it's happened in one industry after another, and it leaves neighborhoods devastated. They lose their local stores, people lose their jobs, retirees lose their pensions. there's nothing left behind. So here's my basic plan. It says if you want to do private equity, you want to come in and buy a business, people can buy businesses, we're not going to stop that, but you can't buy a business to suck all the value out of it. You got to buy a business and put the value in, and then you've got to share in any losses. In other words, to put you on the side of trying to make that business succeed, right? To hire more people, to make that business grow. This idea that we're going to let people make $1 bazillion by coming in to functioning businesses and just vacuuming out all the value and leaving the workers behind, that's got to stop. And so I got a plan around that. I also want to say, just because you mentioned it in passing, a plan around housing as well. And this may be bigger than we want to do right here, but I want to, we have a problem in housing, real crisis in housing. We haven't been building housing for middle class, working poor, poor, the homeless, people with disabilities, people who are seniors and need a place to age in place. And the reason we don't have this housing supply anymore is two things have shifted over the last couple of generations. The first is private developers, the kind who built the little 1-bedroom, 2-bath house that I grew up in, converted the garage for my 3 brothers to sleep in. They're not building those houses anymore. They build the McMansions. So if you want a McMansion, there's plenty of supply for you. But if you're looking for a much smaller, more modest home, it's just they're not building new ones. The second is federal government's just not making the investments in affordable housing that it once made. So people talk about how to fix this. They talk about increasing housing vouchers and so on. The problem is not the demand side. The problem is the supply side. So I've got a proposal paid for that's nearly $500 billion in putting it into housing. It's about 3.2 million new housing units across this country. It's for a whole spectrum of housing, encourages communities to work together on housing, has lots of different ways to do this. The estimate, independent estimate, is it would bring down rents by about 10% across the board and would help first-time buyers get in. But it also has a second feature to it that's special, and that is the recognition that for generations, one of the ways that working families have built wealth has been through housing. They bought a home and it appreciated over time. And if you were lucky and grandma and grandpa could stay there till they died, then the next generation got a boost and the next generation after that. So it's no surprise that starting long ago, America subsidized the purchase of homes for white people and discriminated against the purchase of homes for African Americans. In communities of color, they redlined and said, nope, going to discriminate against housing there. And as a result, you see a gap, not only in who owns homes, but a gap in wealth. And that gap lasts generation after generation after generation. So part of my housing plan is to acknowledge what happened with redlining, how we still see the effects of it, and to say, I'm going to set aside a part of what we're doing on housing in order to help remedy that and to give people who've lived in formerly redlined areas assistance to be first-time home buyers, people who were ripped off during the financial crisis, some assistance so they can be homeowners again and start building that wealth for themselves and for their children and for their grandchildren.
Great. Thank you for that. Thank you for the question, that answer. And so for the next part, and also I'm just going to warn you, I'm going to be heavy going forward because.
Okay, fair enough. That was 2 answers in one.
Yes, and it was very substantive, and I appreciate that. Yeah. But we actually have some studio audience questions. So let's see who's up first. Okay, so first we have Vanessa Snow, who is a member of our partner organization, Mi Gente. And Vanessa, do you want to share your question?
Sure.
Great.
Hi, Vanessa.
Hi, Senator Warren. So I'm Vanessa. I'm a Mi Gente member here based in Boston. And I wanted to know, you have said that you would investigate government officials who have committed crimes while in office when you're president. Would you also investigate companies that commit crimes such as Palantir, which is providing the tech backbone for ICE?
So the answer is yes. While we're still within the statute of limitations, I will have a Justice Department that will investigate crime. And that's crime by individuals that's committed. And I particularly wanted this warning to go out. It is against the law right now in America to assault an immigrant, to sexually assault an immigrant child, to deny someone health care that they need. And while the current president, Donald Trump, may be willing to look the other way, when I'm president, I will not, and I will investigate those crimes. I will also investigate corporations that commit crimes. And I think it's important to say that right now, because I think it's important for everyone who's involved in this system to take a deep breath and look at what they do. And if they are in violation of the law, then they need to realize there will be consequences. Thank you, Vanessa. I appreciate you raising it.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks, Maurice.
For sure. Now we're going to hear from Danny Moskovich, who's a member of If Not Now here in Boston. So what's your question for Senator Warren, Danny?
Thank you for having me. My name's Danny. I'm a member of If Not Now. You were actually the first person I ever voted for in 2012 here in Massachusetts. So thank you. Thank you for putting forward a bold vision for structural change in this country, then and now. As a young American Jew, I am horrified that for 52 years the Israeli government has maintained a military occupation over millions of Palestinians under the guise of protecting Jews. Currently, the Israeli government is depriving Palestinians of their right to live securely in their own homes, to move freely, to vote for a government that controls their lives, and all with guns that say property of the U.S. Military. Like every other issue, you talk about Trump has accelerated this crisis, but Obama's approach also further allowed the Israeli right to further entrench the occupation. And I would love to know, how will your plan to confront the crisis of occupation depart from decades of U.S. foreign policy and apply meaningful pressure on the Israeli government to move toward freedom and dignity for both Israelis and Palestinians?
Thank you for the question, Danny. There we go. Thank you, Danny.
All right. Okay.
Thank you for the question.
This is live. Clearly.
But that's the best part,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
You just never know what's going to happen.
Democracy.
Next.
It's happening.
That's right. That's right. So I think of this as starting with our values, and that is recognizing the dignity and worth of every human being. I believe that Israelis and Palestinians want a chance at self-determination and a chance at building a future for themselves, for their children, and for their grandchildren. The way we will do that is, the way they will do that, is a two-state solution. Excuse me. And so our role is not to determine what the two-state solution is, but it is to push them in that direction. Donald Trump and, excuse me, Benjamin Netanyahu have pulled in exactly the opposite direction. And it is important as allies. I've got something caught in my throat here. This is live.
Can we get some water, please? Oh, yep, water right next to your...
There we go.
Okay, look, there it is.
There we go.
Right. Democracy is messy.
And thirsty.
And thirsty. Yeah,
Exactly right.
especially now. We're all thirsty for democracy
That's right.
everywhere in this country.
We are. But you're right. That for a long time, everyone has mouthed the words two-state solution, but no one has been willing to push hard. I believe that what we can do best for peace in the Middle East is to push the current government in Israel toward negotiations for a two-state solution. And we get a two-state solution, that is the end of the occupation. It means that the parties then have self-determination and are able to build a future going forward, each of them, for their own children and their own grandchildren. But it's going to take a willingness to push and to push hard. Thank you, Danny.
Thank you. So the WFP was in part built by labor unions, right? It's a very big part of our DNA. The opportunity to join a union, no matter where you work, is the best way to raise wages, improve working conditions, and make it possible for us to provide for our families. How will you use your executive, regulatory, and legislative authority to throw open the doors for millions of more workers to join unions? And do you think we should have the right to reach citywide or industry-wide agreements?
Okay, so it's a great frame.
Okay.
When I talk about big structural change in this country, and I talk about the economy, the first place I start is the importance of having more power in the hands of workers. Right now, we've got a problem in this country with giant corporations that just keep getting bigger and bigger and bigger. They roll over their employees, they roll over their customers, they roll over the communities where they are, and they exercise enormous political power in this country. We need power in the hands of workers. The best way to do that is make it easier to join a union and give unions more power when they negotiate. Mm-hmm. So you asked me about the different tools available. How about we'll start out with, I love saying this, what a president can do all by herself.
Yeah.
Part one, how about we get a Secretary of Labor who's on the side of labor? Mm-hmm. You know, this really, I mean, this is important. We kind of laugh, but it's true. You know as well as anyone, all of the regulations that get written around what constitutes a bargaining unit and what constitutes an unfair labor practice, that the regulatory part of this starts in the Department of Labor. And the charge to the Department of Labor is to help workers, not to be on the side of business, management, opposed to labor. So I commit that we will have a Secretary of Labor, not just who's on the side of labor, but who's aggressively on the side of labor. Someone who understands what it means to working people to be out there on the lines every day. And this is so critically important at a time when we need to strengthen union membership into new areas where it hasn't been before. So this is partly about areas where we've had union membership before, but we're moving in, especially in a gig economy, how it is that we're able to bring more people into the union movement. So I think part one is to get a really good Secretary of Labor. Part two is there are laws we're going to need to get through Congress and real change. And I'm ready to tackle right to work or right to work for nothing or whatever you want to call it. Yep. I think that this is something we should look at the federal level. This idea that states can just cripple local unions and then use that as a way to compete for business around the country. Hey, they say to a big corporation, move to my state because my state is going to give workers even less power. That's a federal issue, and we need to be making change at the federal level. I think that's critically important. Third part is the investment in jobs. You know, we put more into jobs, and it makes a big difference. I'm going to hit this one, if I can, just from a little bit of an angle. I strongly support the Clean New Deal. I believe that as a country, we need to get to net zero by 2030. I believe we could do that. The problem is, even if America gets there, we're only 20% of the problem. You got 80% of the problem around the world. So the best estimate is that there's an upcoming $23 trillion market for green energy, green products, desalinization, how to clean carbon out of the air, how to clean carbon out of the water. And much of this stuff hasn't been invented yet. So I have a plan to make huge investments in what we do best, research and development, to come up with the new ideas to save our planet, but at the same time to say to all the world, you can use all these great ideas we've got if you build it right here in the United States of America. best estimate, that would be about 1.2 million new manufacturing jobs, good union manufacturing jobs. We build those products here in America, sell them around the world, give them away around the world. That's how we clean up our earth. We stop the climate change that's headed in our direction, and we produce a stronger economy here at home with more people in unions and the benefits flowing to our children and to our grandchildren.
Thank you for that. So next we have another member from the studio audience. So from our Rhode Island Working Families Party, we have a question from Sydney Keene.
Hi, Senator. Thank you so much.
Hi, Sydney.
So in my home state of Rhode Island, we've been organizing to shut down the Wyatt Detention Center, which is a for-profit prison in a majority immigrant city of Central Falls. They have contracted with ICE to house ICE detainees. So several of us here today, will be actually protesting there tomorrow. And so my question to you is, generally speaking, what's your position on the movement to abolish ICE and the for-profit prison industrial complex? And then more specifically, what message would you send to the prison's investors who are refusing to end the ICE contract, the politicians who are putting profits before our humanity, and to those of us who are planning to protest?
Okay. So I think I need that then.
Yes.
Okay.
There we go. Thank you. So thank you for all you've been doing out there. I will end for-profit prisons at the federal level. I think this is wrong. I don't believe that anyone should be making a profit from locking other people up. And that's true in the prison system, and it's also true in the immigrant detention centers. This is wrong. This is a government function, and the government alone should be conducting this function. And if we don't have the capacity, then we need to rethink how many people we're locking up and for what reasons. So I'm strong on this one. Your question about ICE, here's how I look at this. I've been down to the border. I went down shortly after it came out, more than a year ago now, that our federal government, in our name, using our money, was separating children from their families. I went down to see it for myself. I saw what looked like a giant Amazon warehouse, only it smelled bad. And I saw the cages, cage after cage after cage of men, maybe 10 feet wide, 40 foot deep, a toilet back in the corner, men packed in so tightly they couldn't all lie down at the same time. Cages on the other side of women. And then the part that would just tear your heart out, back in the main room, cages of little girls. Just freestanding cages with a guard tower in the center, with no one in it but little girls. Then cages of little boys. Back in the corner, a big cage of nursing mothers. I stopped and I visited with some of these mothers who told me, I remember one who said that she had given a drink of water to a police officer and that the word had then gone back that she was helping the police, and the gangs heard that, and she knew that meant she and her baby would die. So she wrapped up her baby and ran for the border. Those are the people who are coming to our borders seeking help. They're people now in the United States seeking asylum, seeking refugee status. And yet we have an immigration system that is putting huge resources into tracking down people who pose little or no threat to us. A system that cannot understand the difference in the threat posed by a criminal
a terrorist and a 12-year-old child, a mama running with her baby, is a system that is broken and needs to be reformed from beginning to end. And I will do that as President of the United States. We need a system that keeps us safe and that aligns with our values. We need to live our values every single day. Thank you for your work.
Thank you. So as we mentioned earlier, and we're down to our last 15, so this is going to be a little bit of a... Yes, yes. And so we mentioned that we have questions from folks in the studio audience, and we also have questions for folks who are watching remotely. So we have a question from somebody in Detroit, a member of Detroit Action, Audrey Jeans. Go ahead, Audrey.
Hi. Hi, Senator.
Hi, Audrey.
I'm from Pontiac, Michigan. This the question is for you. In Boston, an American descendant of slavery family is worth $8, and a white family is worth $247,000. This is typical all across America. So, Senator Warren, are you ready to stop playing games and to admit paying the debt that is owed to Americans, descendants of slavery? Hashtag ADOS, by giving at least $20 trillion in cash reparation and building multi-generational institutions specifically for ADOS society, because ADOS is only voting for candidates that give us transformative policy in return, formative policy in return. And this quotes the numbers, it came from the Boston Globe paper. So if anybody want to check it out and see, they can find it on there.
Yep. So
Thank you for the question, and you're right about the numbers. I remember when they came out in the Globe talking about the wealth gap, and of course, it's partly about slavery, and it's partly about centuries, decades of discrimination piled on top of that. Our country was founded on principles of freedom and built on the backs of enslaved people. I support the bill in the House that would move forward on a commission on reparations. I believe now it has 100 co-sponsors in the House and is gaining momentum. This is a conversation Americans need to have across this country. It's about our foundation, and it's about the decades of discrimination that have followed and that are felt even today, as you rightly point out, when you look at the difference in the black-white wealth gap, and you see it through every other part of what we work on. African-American students are more likely to have to borrow money to go to college, borrow more money while they're in college, and have a harder time paying that money when they leave college. On the health front, we see the racialized differences in health outcomes, and particularly the maternal health crisis for black mothers in America, who are more likely to die at 2 to 3 times the rates of white mothers. We see it in housing. I was just talking about it, as we still see the effects of redlining in one area after another. In fact, entrepreneurship. I'll just do one more. We have a black-white entrepreneurship gap in America, so that African Americans are about half as likely to be able to successfully start a small business as whites. You know what the principal reason is? No access to capital, not loan money. Loan money you got to carry with you and make those payments every month. It's capital. And why is there less access to capital? It's exactly what you pointed out, and that is the black-white wealth gap. So I have a plan on that one for $7 billion, which is just about what it would take to close that entrepreneurship gap, that would be there to be able to make equity investments into businesses that are owned by people of color, people who have been shut out of the process before. It's looking for ways to level the playing field in many ways. That's not reparations. It doesn't answer your reparations question. I just add it on because I'm with the House bill on reparations, but I think there is so much more we need to think about and so much more that we can do.
Great. Thank you. Thank you for that. And thanks for the question on the live stream. Next, we have another live stream question. It's coming from our New Mexico State Committee member, Lori Wiaki, who is Kotichi, Zuni, and Dene, and a member of the Native American Voters Alliance. Go ahead, Lori.
Warren, I'm grateful to be able to ask you this question. But what we're interested in knowing is if you go forward to become the Democratic nominee, the issue of being called Pocahontas will be a prevalent concern. Yeah. This will resurface the racist and derogatory way that Native Americans have been portrayed in many different settings. So what is your plan to deal with this issue? This will be important for us to know if we are to motivate Native Americans to vote for you.
Right. So thank you for the question, Lori.
So as I said right at the beginning, Donald Trump has a plan. And the plan is blame everybody else for whatever's wrong in your life. And to stir up as much hatred, as much dissension, to get people to call each other names. He's not going to stop. He's going to keep that up as much as he can throughout the campaign. He'll do it every single day. And it's not going to stop. This isn't just going to be me. It's going to be anybody who's involved in this process. So the way I see it is we have a decision to make going forward. And that is whether we're going to give in or whether we're going to decide to become partners in everything we do. Goodness knows, like anyone who's being honest, I know I've made mistakes and I have regrets and I've apologized for them. But I try every day to be a good partner. And to be a good partner means to think about investment in tribal areas. It means about making sure that Indian country is represented at the table when we're talking about how to put policies together. It also means treating everyone with dignity and respect. And I think that's a powerful part of what we do. So I have already tried to work with many Native groups to address specific problems, for example, high suicide rates, and to make sure that federal law is changed so that it is addressed in Indian country in ways that are culturally appropriate, because we know there's a real crisis there. On the housing plan, a part of the housing plan is to make sure that Indian housing is fully funded so that there is real money available, block grant money available for the tribes to be able to build out the housing that they need to, as well as the infrastructure that they need to. Same is true on education, about making sure that Native American colleges are able to receive the funding that they need so that Native American students, if that's where they choose to go, have an opportunity to do that, and that those schools and other minority-serving institutions are well-funded and well-grounded. So I think of this as not tell, but show every day with each of these plans. But ultimately, it's going to come down to all of us. We're going to have to make a decision about what kind of a country we want to be. Are we going to let Donald Trump turn us against each other? Are we going to follow him every time he's got an ugly word to call someone, or every time he tries to insult another group? Or are we going to stand together and be stronger as we decide together that we're going to build an America that doesn't just work for a handful of rich folks at the top, but for the first time, really build an America that is the America of our best values? That's why I'm in this race.
because I think it is true Donald Trump is so immature that it will be a problem. Interested in trying to figure out how we motivate Native people to vote for you. So we're really interested in this. So thank you.
Thank you. Thanks so
Thank
much.
you.
All right,
Thank
so
you.
Senator Warren. All right, so Senator Warren, we have two more questions.
Okay.
And then you get your final remarks.
Okay.
So don't filibuster yourself in answering the questions. Okay. Fair enough. Okay, great. So here we go. So this first question is from Super Volunteer. Barbara Atkins. And Super Volunteers fuel the Working Families Party. They are the lifeblood of our organization. They help us win elections across the country. And so we're so excited to have Barbara here. So Barbara, please ask your question.
Hi, Senator Warren.
Hi, Barbara.
As a parent, I'm really frightened at the state of the planet that we're delivering to our children. And I know you touched on climate change a bit, but I want to know how you would ensure that the issue of climate change would get the urgency that's required and that action could be taken in a short time period, regardless of the political makeup of Congress.
Right. Climate change poses the ultimate threat to life on Earth, and we're running out of time. We need to acknowledge that head on. So I think of this as we need to do everything we can, and we need to do it as fast as we can. Part one, I will do everything that a president can do by herself starting on the first day. So for example, I will put a moratorium in place. No new drilling, no new mining on any federal lands in the United States or offshore drilling. That helps make our federal lands, which are nearly a quarter of all our lands in America, on the side of climate instead of there for the oil companies and the other extraction companies. Those are the kinds of shifts you can make. I won't have a coal lobbyist to be the head of the EPA, right? Good place to go on this. But there are many things that we can do on our own. A president can do on her own on the first day to move in that direction. And I will use all of them. I think it's critically important. The second, though, is to move the agency. You've got to have someone strong at the EPA who is ready to be aggressive. Who knows that, yep, it may be that the oil industry is right in their face, that the big polluters don't want to spend the time and the money to have to clean up. But someone who is on the side of real climate change and on the side of protecting us from all that's happening and coming our way. So that's a second part. A third part of this is how to move Congress. So I mentioned earlier that I have a proposal that would create about 1.2 million new manufacturing jobs in America. Green manufacturing, good jobs, union jobs, strong jobs. You know, that's one that not only gets us some allies on the climate side, it also puts some real pressure on Congress. Why do they want to resist that? These are their constituents who want those jobs. Another one in terms of pulling allies in, I've just put out a rural plan, and that rural plan includes in it, we got a problem in farming. Farming right now, many farming practices are contributing to the destruction of our earth. It's not helpful to our land. It's not helpful to our water. I was just meeting with folks all over rural Iowa about this. So one of my proposals is to enlist farmers in changing their farming practices and putting them on the front lines of fighting climate change. If they have some financial help to be able to do that, to break this cycle of fence post to fence post, plowing the land to put as much commodity as they can, soy and corn, as densely as they can, because it's right now the way that many of them can barely earn a living. If we can turn that so that we're supporting sustainable farming practices and putting farmers out there helping us pull carbon out of the air, naturally, helping us keep it in the ground naturally. That's another front on the climate change that not only is good for the environment, but it's good with Congress, right? There are a lot of folks from farm states that may be enthusiastic or not enthusiastic if it's only phrased as a climate issue, but when it's phrased as sustainable for their farmers, and their farmers are hungry for this. Farmers are ready for this. We now have another constituency that gets in the fight. And as I talked about earlier, when Maurice and I were talking about this, I think it's time to get rid of the filibuster. And that helps us get more through the Congress. And as I've said, every time I talk about one of these plans, when I win, it makes it that much easier to get the plan through. It makes it that much easier to say to Democrats, guys, this is what our party wants. This is what we stood up and fought for. And to say to Republicans, this is what America wants. Let's get in this fight and make it happen. So, on climate, there are a lot of pieces to this plan because that's what it's going to take. We got to make a lot of change in a lot of different directions. But I really am optimistic. We can do this one. We can. We just have to decide to do it and then get in there and fight.
Thanks. Okay, we're down to our final question.
Okay.
And then after that, you can make your final case to everybody here. So, final question, and this is one that's very near and dear to my heart, and also is an intersection of a lot of the things that we talked about: the legacy of slavery, racial inequality, the consolidation of corporate power. So, the 1994 crime bill is known as one of the key contributors to mass incarceration, and as a black person who grew up in the 80s and 90s, I could attest to the ravages that the war on drugs and then the 90s crime bill had on our communities. Now, there are movement organizations and many that are attempting to mount a grassroots movement to repeal the 94 crime bill. And so I'd like you to respond to that. Would you support a repeal of the 94 crime bill? And what is your plan for tackling mass incarceration?
So, thank you, Maurice. Let me do both halves of this. I think the devastation from the 94 crime bill has now been well documented. And there are huge parts of that need to be swept away. It was just wrong, and it needs to be changed, needs to be rolled back, needs to be repealed. But that's not enough. There is now a problem within our criminal justice system that runs from the front, what we declare to be illegal, through the system that is a justice system that treats blacks and whites, Latinx and whites differently through the system. We need help in the system on how justice actually works. Public defenders who are so under-resourced and overburdened by the cases they have, through the court system, through the incarceration system, and then through the reentry system, that we need to rethink criminal justice reform from the beginning to the end. And we also need to think of it less in terms of the goal is to lock up people, and more in terms of how do we lift up people? How do we break the cycle that keeps more and more and more people going to prison who then come out with broken lives and an inability to re-enter society because so many doors are then closed to them. So I've put out some parts of it. For example, we were talking about private prisons. I oppose private prisons. I've got more of it coming out very soon, a more comprehensive plan on this. But the basic approach to it is to say we can't do this as one regulation over here and two statutes over there. We need to think about this system from the very front end, the school to prison pipeline, how it is that people start out in this system, and then how they get ground through it, how race intersects it at every single point along the line, and how people's lives and communities are destroyed by the end. We can't keep doing this in this country. My commitment is that we build a criminal justice system that is at least closer to the 4 words above the United States Supreme Court: equal justice under law. That should be our guiding principle, and that should mean we develop we develop a criminal justice system that is more in line with our values and that is fairer to everyone.
Thank you. And so we've reached the balance of your time. And thank you to the studio audience. Thank you to our folks from Rhode Island Working Families Party, the folks in the live stream. So Senator Warren, so we have about 5 minutes.
Got it.
And so make your final case.
Sure. So when I decided to run for President of the United States, I knew exactly what I would be fighting for. It would be for an America that wasn't just working for a thinner and thinner slice at the top and not working for anyone else. It would be an America that recognized the worth of every single human being. It would be an America that was an America of opportunity. And for me, that really is the heart of it. I had a dream from the time I was in 2nd grade. I wanted to be a public school teacher. I committed early. I used to line my dollies up and teach school. I had a reputation for being tough but fair. But my family didn't have any money. And by the time I graduated from high school, we didn't have the money for a college application, much less to send me off to 4 years at a university. And so, like a lot of people, I have a story that has a lot of twists and turns, including dropping out of school at 19 and getting married, and I got babies in this and all kinds of things. But my chance in life was a commuter college that cost $50 a semester. And for a price that I could pay for on a part-time waitressing job, I got my big chance. I got a chance to become a public school teacher. And I became a special needs teacher. So I've lived my dream job. I love that work, and I probably would still be doing that work today. But my story had more twists and turns. By the end of the first year, I was visibly pregnant. The teacher did, or the principal did what principals did in those days, wished me luck and hired someone else for the job. That's how I end up with a baby on hip, heading off to law school, public law school that cost $450 a semester. I practiced law for about 45 minutes and then ended up right back in my first calling, which is teaching. I traded little ones for great big ones. And I taught in law school. And I taught about money, about contract law and commercial law and bankruptcy law, every part of it. But there was always one question: what's happening to working families in this country? That's what I worked on. And I saw, why is America's middle class being hollowed out? Why is it that people who work every bit as hard as people did a generation or 2 generations ago today find the path so much rockier and steeper, and for people of color, even rockier and even steeper? And it goes back to where I started this. Ultimately, I saw it. It's because government's not on their side. It's because government is on the side of giant drug companies and not people who are trying to get a prescription filled. It's on the side of billionaires who don't want to pay their taxes, instead of on the side of our kids who are using textbooks that are 9 years old and are being taught in classrooms that ceiling tiles are falling down. But in a democracy, we have a chance to change that. In 2020, I think this is it. This is what it's come down to. So we can be that other America. We can be that America that just keeps working better and better and better for a thinner and thinner slice. Or we can be the America of opportunity. Opportunity for every kid to get a good education. Opportunity for every kid to get a decent job or to start a business. Maybe to buy a home. To marry whoever they want to marry. And to raise a family if that's what they want to do. Remember, I'm a special needs teacher. Sometimes opportunity just means a chance to live independently. But for me, That's what pulls me in, because that's what government can do. A government on your side can help expand those opportunities. That's the America I believe that together we can build. That's why I'm in this fight, and I would be so honored to have the Working Family Party endorsement for this, because I believe that together, that's how we'll get it done.
Well, thank you, Senator Warren. And if we could bring up Nalini. Thank you.
We got this.
Thanks. Yep. Well, you got this too. You're doing all right. Okay.
Okay.
And so, just the last couple of remarks. Thanks to everyone joining us tonight at home. We all appreciate you. We all love you. Thank you, Senator Warren. And if you want to get involved in our endorsement process, text WFP to 738-674 and tune in on Thursday at 8 p.m. Eastern for our next presidential interview. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everybody. Thank you.
This is democracy.
Yes, absolutely. You were great. Good to see you.